Yeah. All right. Welcome to the gosh, is this our fourth, I think, in the series in the of the Blind Birder Bird-a-Thon community conversations. We are so glad to have you joining us tonight. My name is Kat Fribley. I'm the executive director here at Birdability and part of the planning team for the Blind Birder Bird-a-Thon. And I am going to quickly turn it over to Martha Steele, one of the planners. But before I do that, I just want to let folks know it is the hopefully day you have been waiting for, and registration is now open for the Blind Birder Birdathon. I'll be sending something out after this call to everyone who participated. And so just wanted to let you know that registration is now open for May 3rd and 4th. And we look forward to having you participate. And Martha, I am now going to just turn it over to you, if I could, and have you introduce our speaker tonight and get us started.
Thank you so much, Kat, and thank everyone for joining us. I also want to acknowledge Jerry Berrier and Donna Posent, who are also on the call, and they are the other part of us three musketeers working with Kat to bring you the Blind Birders Birdathon. I'm very excited that it's a global birdathon this year, and we already have uh, a lot of interest from Canada, Venezuela, South Africa, Mexico, and beyond. So it's just going to be a fabulous event. So welcome. And I am absolutely so happy to have my friend John Kricher join us tonight. John has been a birder since childhood, growing up in the Philadelphia area. So he knows a lot about birds. And he also happens to have a pretty keen interest and passion about dinosaurs. The John was able to turn his avocation in childhood to a very distinguished professional career. He was professor of biology at Wheaton College in Massachusetts for, I think, 46 or 7 years, somewhere in there. And he also has been active in professional and amateur birding and conservation organizations. He's the past president of the Association of Field Ornithologists, of the Wilson Ornithological Society, of the Nuttall Ornithological Club. He's also served on a number of different boards, including for the American Birding Association, the New Jersey Audubon Society, and Manomet Center for Conservation Sciences here in Massachusetts. John also is an absolutely prolific writer, has written many books, and probably, I think one of his best known books is an absolutely fabulous book. I've read it twice myself. It's called a Neotropical Companion. John writes in a very easy to read style for the lay audience, and has just one fascinating story after another in his book. So I certainly recommend his books. He's also authored various Peterson field guides, such as To Eastern Forest, Western Forest. He was the author of the Peterson Reference Guide to Bird Behavior. Uh, and he's just really been a tremendous professional in the field for a long time. So I love John and I love birding with him, and he's just a very entertaining speaker as well. And I hope you learn a lot tonight, as I'm sure you will. So take it away, John. Welcome.
Thank you, Martha. Can everybody hear me? Am I coming through?
Yes.
Oh, good. That's swell. That's what we want. Well, I am very deeply honored to be asked to present this tonight, and especially from my dear, dear friend Martha Steele, whom I've known for ever so long and who has been on so many bird trips with my wife, Martha Vaughn. I seem to have this, gathering of Marthas around me. And so we've had quite a number of adventures together, all involving birds. And when you consider what a bird is, it's really easy to begin to get interested in them and to begin to get really fond of being out among them. It's really wonderful that they're around. Because their sense organs are similar to what human sense organs are. When I first took an ornithology course, get a grip on yourselves, it was 1966. That's right. I was in first year graduate student at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, 1966. And I had never taken a formal ornithology course, but I was quite convinced I probably knew more than most of the students in the class, except that there were some other graduate students in the class who were also as keen as me. So it was a lot of fun. And our professor, Jeff Swinebroad was his name. I got to be very good friends with him. This was in 1966. And Jeff opened, I wrote this in my notes, so I'm not making this up. I still can go back to those notes. And his first words to the class were, birds are audio visually oriented. He put the audio first. That's accurate. Birds, if anything, are more audio oriented than visual oriented in many, many ways. They live their life in a world of a soundscape, almost more than a visual world, although their vision is quite good. And in fact, bird vision is better than human vision because also is part of the ultraviolet. But birds in it's an essential thing about birds. We are always trying to figure out how many birds there are in the world. And it used to be we thought there was something like that's the way science works. We used to think that there were something around, 8 or 9,000 species of birds. Then it went up to 10,000 species of birds. Now it's over 11,000 species of birds in the world. And nobody has seen all of them. There are a few people who have been able, through dogged travel and wealth, to see 10,000. That's a lot of species. It's a lot of species. But you don't have to see a lot of species. You can the pandemic proved that. People got into birds like crazy because they were bored, they were frustrated, they were angry at what was going on around them, and they opened their windows and they listened to the birds. They sat in a park and they listened to the birds, and they suddenly discovered a world they didn't know existed, a world I discovered a very long time ago. So there are 11,000 species of birds. And the first thing to get out of your heads, and I don't think this is going to be a hard sell, is birds don't sing because they want to please humans. In fact, a lot of birds' sounds don't please humans. Now, if you listen to American robins, chirlip, chirly, chirlip, chirly, chirlip, chirly, except they do it better than that, that's pretty pleasing. But if you listen to things and screams of a barn owl, for instance, I doubt that was designed to please humans, although it would work in certain movies. Um, anyway, birds sing and make sounds because they are communicating with one another. And bird sounds are not only species specific, so that within a species like American robin or eastern bluebird or something like that, they can understand each other. Black-capped chickadees have a language. They actually do. I'll tell you about that. But they also each other's language up to a point. You see, there are a number of species of birds that cohabit the woods with black-capped chickadees. chickadee. They don't sound like chickadees, but they understand what the chickadees are saying. They understand when the chickadees are saying there's a predator. And beyond that, they understand when the chickadees are saying the predator's on the ground, the predator's on the ground, or the predator's in the air, the predator's in the air. And so birds have this complex array of sounds that not only are intraspecifically understood within each species, but are also sometimes, to a degree, understood among different species. And the sounds of birds are so diversified, it's absolutely stunning when you hear examples of everything from owls to cranes to songbirds. And let me tell you what some of those things are. Um, one more thing to get in your minds, although I don't think this is a hard sell either. I can still go back to books where in the Middle Ages, where the idea was that birds sang to please humans. Well, like I said, that they never heard a barn owl or a barn owl. It is purely by chance that some bird songs are so pleasing to us, and they really are pleasing. It's just a delight to hear them, and just such a delight. But other bird sounds are harsh. Other bird sounds are kind of piercing. And I'm going to ask Kat to play the sound that I wanted to hear first. Do you know what that is, Kat? Because I didn't want to tell him what the bird is. It's the it's the thing that I wanted to start with.
Yes, I'm going to try playing that in such a way that you can hear without, but
Okay, go ahead, go
I
for it.
think they're going to see it, I'm afraid to say.
Go ahead.
Um,
That incredible sound is a duck. Now you think ducks go quack, 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 quack. They don't go quack, quack, quack. Not all of them. Mallard ducks do. A number of other ducks have various forms of quacking, but that was a duck called a black-bellied whistling duck. They don't occur in Massachusetts, but they do occur way. Well, I'm probably talking to an audience much broader than Massachusetts. So
Yes, you are.
down in coastal southern areas, from coastal Texas on through Florida, you probably are familiar with black-bellied whistling ducks. Lots of different sounds from lots of different birds, and it's indeed a challenge to learn bird song, just as it's a challenge to learn music. Some people have a better ear for learning bird sound than others. And when I say ear, that's ear brain connection, of course. And my ability to do bird sounds is average at best, maybe a tinge above average. But some people are amazing at it. I have a friend, for instance, who lives on the West Coast now. And he came to a magical place with us a few years ago in Ohio in May called McGee Marsh, just south of Lake Erie, where large numbers of migrant birds pile up on migration in May, and then they migrate across Lake Erie on their way up to the boreal forests of Canada to breed. And one of those birds is hard to see. You can have wonderful visions and not find this bird because it is a sculpture. It stays in the shade. It moves slowly, and it's really hard to see in the understory. But it has an amazing song. And I have a friend named Frank who was with us, and he said, "John, I hear a Connecticut warbler." And I said, "Frank, where?" "Oh, yeah, yeah." And then a couple of other people heard it, and we had a Connecticut warbler singing there that we heard. Nobody saw it. Nobody saw it. You couldn't find it, but it was singing up a storm. beautiful whistling sound. And I said, Frank, I didn't know you knew the sound of Connecticut warbler. He said, I've never seen the Connecticut warbler before. He said, I just studied the bird sounds. And that's a Connecticut warbler. And sure enough, it was. And in fact, he could put that on his life list because quite reasonably, some years ago, the American Birding Association said, look, guys, you should be able to count birds that you hear and identify on your life list, because that's just as much a dimension of the bird as is its appearance. And to the birds, at least, it could be even more important in some instances. And there was a movement that began some years ago. Some people think it's quite recent, but it wasn't. Called birding by ear. We got to be good enough at recording bird sounds that we could actually produce videos and tapes, audio tapes that presented those sounds and analyzed how you can tell one from another. Some birds sound similar. And my good friend Dick Walton from Massachusetts did a series of tapes called birding by ear. They went into CDs, and it's just wonderful because he takes groups of birds that have similar songs. An example would be, for instance, the rose-breasted grosbeak, which is a bird of the spring woodlands. It's relatively common where I live in Massachusetts. And then you can compare that with the American robin. And the American robin has a sort of melodic chirlip, chirly, chirlip, chirly, and the rose-breasted grosbeak has a similar but deeply richer song. It's better than a robin. If the two were auditioning to see who was the best singer, the rose-breasted grosbeak would win. But they're really, really similar, and you can learn by and it's really been enhanced with the creation of this program called Merlin, which is an application from the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology. Merlin is an amazing technological breakthrough. And I don't know how many of you have Merlin, but I know many people do. There are millions now that listen to Merlin. And all you have to do is turn the app on, and wherever you are, birds that are making vocalizations will be heard by Merlin, and Merlin will then tell you what they are. And does it always get it right? No. Only 96 or 97% does it get it right. Sure, Merlin makes mistakes, but not many. And so it's a wonderful way to satisfy yourself that when you're out in the morning, particularly in spring, and you put the Merlin app on, and then it tells you what the birds are that are singing. It's a great way to learn how to do it and how to identify birds by voice, and I strongly recommend it. So there's never been a better time technologically to get into birding. Not that you really need the technology. It could be very satisfying without, but if you have the technology, why not use it? And so Merlin is something I very strongly recommend. It's really cool. And I have another story about bird vocalizations. I don't know how many of you heard. I hate to have to say this. I don't know how many you have heard of the ornithologist, birder, artist, writer named Roger Torrey Peterson. This is the man who published a book in 1934 called A Field Guide to the Birds. And that book was not the first field guide by any means, but it's the one that captured the nation, because the way the book was structured, the way Peterson went about it, the way he explained it, it became the field guide that everybody used, and went through multiple editions. It's something now like 7 editions. And in Field Guide to the Birds, Roger Torrey Peterson soon started describing the voices of birds because he was so good at identifying birds by voice. He spent a great deal of time learning them. And he has a wonderful anecdote in one of the chapters he wrote in one of his books, where a bunch of people said they were going to go out bright and early. I think it was in the spring, and I think it was somewhere up in northern New England. I'm not sure of that, but they were going to go out very early, and they said, "Roger, come on, you want to go?" And he said, "No, no, I'm just going to stay in." And he was actually in a tent, and he said, "I'm just going to stay in my tent. I just want to lie here for a while. Go away, and go enjoy your birds." And he was awake, and he made a list of all the birds he heard. He just systematically, and they were singing all around him. It was a May morning. And when they got back, he had seen more, or he'd heard more birds than they had seen. So that was pretty incredible as to how he could use bird vocalizations to understand what kinds of birds were around. And so you come down to the question of why do birds vocalize? And let's listen to one that I have we've set aside. Let's listen to a laughing gull.
Laughing gull.
That's from the Nuttall Library. Now, I've got to believe many of you who have been to eastern beaches have heard laughing gulls. That's almost an iconic sound of the beach in summer. If you think back to going to whatever beach you want to name, you heard those birds. And they're called laughing gulls. There are other names you could have for them based on their appearance, but they're called laughing gulls because the dominant characteristic of their phenotype is their song, their sound. And I'll get to what a song versus a call is in a moment, but that's what they sound like. And so these birds have a very distinctive sound that you can hear for a long distance. And it's all up and down the beaches of North America, at least Eastern North America, including Texas, you name it, wherever. It's a very, very characteristic bird. And then there's the bird you hear in all the movies. What do you think the bird is that you hear in all the movies? Yeah, you got it right, common loon. So let's hear what the common loon is. You can hear the common loon in Amazon jungle movies, but it's wrong. They don't go there. Here we go. That's the common loon, and that's just one of the various yodeling sounds that it can do. Its dependence on vocalization for the ability to reproduce is profound. That's how it defends its territory. And loons actually fight for lakes because that's one of the limiting factors in loon populations is do they have a lake to breed on? And so that sound, that haunting, yodeling sound of the common loon has been co-opted for years and years by Hollywood, and it shows up in all sorts of weird movies, including science fiction movies. Bird vocalizations have hit Hollywood. So why do they do these kinds of vocalizations and what are they doing? So let's think about chickadees, the black-capped chickadee. I'm sure many of you know the black-capped chickadee very well. Common woodland bird in eastern North America. There are other chickadees in western North America, but chickadees are called chickadees. And I should mention something. The laughing gull, as I said, is named for its sound. So it has an onomatopoetic name. And many, many bird species are not named for their plumage. They're named for their sound. And some of these include things like the common loon that I just mentioned, and also a common bird, the grackle. Where did they get a name like grackle? Wait till you hear them call, and you'll see. Bobolink, which William Cullen Bryant called Robert of Lincoln, the bobolink. Bobolink, 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 bobolink. That's a really poor imitation of a bobolink. They do it so much better. But there are dozens and dozens of birds that are named primarily for the way they sound and not the way they look. There are many that are named for the way they look too, like scarlet tanager, for instance. And so, anyway, birds do vocalize, and there are recognized by ornithologists two categories of vocalization, and then there are subcategories. But the two categories are bird songs, which you hear when you hear something like a wood thrush. Let's play the wood thrush so we can hear that lovely song. That is a beautiful, beautiful flute-like song. And if you were to give people the choice of would you rather see the wood thrush or hear the wood thrush, a lot of people knowledgeable about wood thrush would say, well, I'd like to hear it. It's really what distinguishes it, that wonderful voice. And that's true of the thrushes in North America, whether it's a veery or a gray-cheeked thrush or Swainson's thrush, Bicknell's thrush. The songs are hermit thrush. I don't know if I mentioned that. The songs are just outstanding. And bird songs are typically used for two functions. This has been known for quite some time, but it wasn't easy to figure out. And that is the songs function primarily to establish territories for the birds. They let other birds of the same species and sometimes other species know that a particular bird is there claiming a territory. And the songs also attract mates because typically males arrive back in the spring before females. And even if they don't go anywhere, they start to sing first before females get interested. And so courtship and territory establishment are both functions or outcomes rather of bird song. And bird song can be very, very, very vigorous. There's a bird called the red-eyed vireo, and the red-eyed vireo sings relentlessly. It's like it just can't stop hearing itself. And someone once counted all the songs of red-eyed vireo emitted in a day, and it was in the thousands. It just uh, moves up into the canopy of a tree and sings over and over. Here's one coming up. In the summer, that's a background sound of the woodland of much of eastern and central North America. They are constantly singing, and more so than many other birds do. Birds, the best time to hear birds, if you want to go out and just have a whole chorus of birds, and most people know this, is at least if you're talking about land birds, um, early in the morning. You get up at dawn and you go out and you listen for the birds. And as the sun begins to rise, we have what is called the dawn chorus. And one species of bird after another starts to sing until you have a whole orchestra of birds singing, whether it's a woodlot or whether they're out in a field, wherever. That's when they get really active. And this is particularly true of birds that live in forests and areas where they rely on insects for food during the breeding season. Why do they get up and start singing before they do anything else? It's kind of thought, and ornithologists have difficulty getting convincing data on all this because and ornithology has come a long, long way. We know so much more about birds than we knew when I first started becoming a birder as a 5-year-old. We really do know a lot about them. But the best thing we can say about the dawn chorus is it coincides with the time when the birds are awake and there is some light, and the birds can reestablish their relationships, if you want to call it that. Neighbor wood thrushes or neighbor robins or neighbor cardinals can reestablish, this is my territory, this is my territory. Hello, Joe. Hello, Joe. Hello, Joe. Hello, Steve. Hello, Steve. Hello, Steve. And they go back and forth and they reestablish their territorial boundaries by singing. That's one of the things. And you say, well, why do they do it so early? Well, any of them at that season of the year are insectivorous and the bugs ain't out yet. The bugs are still inert because of the cool mornings. Bugs, unlike birds, are not warm blooded. And so they have to warm up before they get active and move around. So the birds are optimizing. They're singing very early in the morning and that has a function. And then they'll sing a bit less as the morning goes on because that's when they have to go out and search for food and attend to nesting behavior, all of the things that go along with bird reproduction. So again, that's a very critical characteristic of song. But we've talked about song, and there's also a category of bird vocalizations known as calls, call notes. And we have a bird in Massachusetts, the state bird of Massachusetts, that has an onomatopoetic name based on its call. It's the black-capped chickadee. It's the bird that goes chickadee dee dee, chickadee, chickadee dee dee dee. And this bird has been studied intensively. And the way it says chickadee with its call note is a code for all sorts of different information to other chickadees. Chickadees are social birds. Groups of them move through together in woodlots in the wintertime, and they hear each other in the summertime. And so the chickadee call note is a call note that is basically structured to keep individuals informed of each other, and they can even send signals, as I alluded to earlier, of the presence of predators. So call notes are the bird's kind of common everyday language. They're not meant to defend territories. They're not meant to court the opposite sex. They're meant to communicate within the species. And that's why some of those communications can be so important that other species of birds pick up on them and they say, hey, the chickadees are really getting nervous over there. Something's going on. And the other thing they do is they mob predators. Like if there's a little screech owl or something that's sticking out of a hole and they see that this is a predator, screech owls eat chickadees. They can mob it and sort of chickadee all over the place. And it's a signal to all the other birds, basically, that this predator is present. So calls are complex and songs are complex. And songbirds are birds that have complex songs. And we don't have enough time for me to explain how that's done anatomically, but it's really quite interesting. And call notes are generally not as melodic as songs, far from it, but they're functional. And some birds, like gulls, loons, ducks, there's no distinction really between songs and calls. It's not right to call them songs. They're not songbirds. They don't have the ability to make real songs. So it's been fun for me to learn a lot about bird songs, and I've gotten much more. I wish I had a better ear for it, but good old Merlin comes in. Um, so I recommend Merlin. I'm willing to talk about it if you have any questions. I could go on this for a long time. One of the new areas in research now, incidentally, on birdsong is that here we go again. It used to be thought that male birds were the ones that sang, female birds didn't sing. That's wrong. There are a great many females that sing. And they often sing differently from males, and they don't sing as intensively as males typically do in the spring. But there are a great many different, even Baltimore Orioles. You think of a Baltimore Oriole, for instance, as a typical songbird. The males sit up in the canopy of trees just singing the best of their Oriole song. Females sing too. And so that's an area of very active research right now. And it could have been an area of active research 20, 30 years ago, but nobody thought it was important. And then recently, well, female ornithologists said, let's look at birdsong more closely. And darned if the females don't sing in many species. And in some species, males and females sing duets. This is true of wrens, for instance. Not many of them do it up in the temperate zone, but a great many tropical birds, tropical forest wrens, you think you're hearing one song. And what you're hearing is two birds singing so well coordinated that you can't distinguish between the two of them, because they're close together and they're singing a duet. One sings part of the song, one sings another part of the song. And so that's another really cool thing about birds. We could go on and on, but I notice I'm over my allotted time, or just about over it. And I promised that you would have ample time for questions, any questions or concerns, cries of moral outrage, whatever. I'll try to answer as many of them as I can. If I can't answer them well, I'll try to make up a convincing answer. No, that's just a joke. Don't worry about it. So it worked for me, though, at Wheaton for 48 years. So, okay, Martha, I'll leave it up to you now to take questions from our listeners.
Yeah, but I'm not going to let you get away without the song of one of my very, very favorite birds,
Oh, the winter wren?
the winter wren.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, we got that keyed up for everybody. So this is before we play it, this is phenomenal. This bird is one of the smallest birds you can imagine. And that is, you put it in your hand, you wouldn't even know you had it in your hand. It's so lightweight. And yet it has a voice that carries remarkably. And the bird has a song which is endlessly complex. Listen up. Now, as the winter wren sings, there'll be variability from one song to another, and the notes are delivered so quickly that the human ear can't separate them. If you slow down the winter wren song, you can begin to appreciate the complexity of that song. It is remarkable. And the reason for that is it's a songbird, and the song is not made in the larynx of the bird, like the vocalization that you're hearing from me. It comes from an area called the syrinx, which is where the bronchial tubes meet the lungs. And there is an area there that has complex musculature that moves one side of the syrinx in one way and the other in another way. So the bird can actually make two separate songs at the same time and meld them together and combine them. That's why they become so complex. And so this little teensy weensy bird of the northern coniferous forests has a song that'll just blow you away if you hear it. You can listen to it all day and never get tired of it. Thanks for asking that question, Martha, or
Oh
bringing it.
yeah, that's it. And I agree. It's a kind of that's one song that just stops me dead in my tracks, and I listen to that, and it's wonderful.
I have,
Okay.
Martha, two things. I have one comment in the chat that I just wanted to share, especially John, as you've been talking about Merlin. I have a hearing challenge, and without my hearing aids, Christy says, I don't hear most birds or ducks. The Merlin app is now Bluetooth directly to my hearing aids, and I hear most birds. Spread the word. So, sharing the ways in which Merlin is able to be used by so many in really adaptive kinds of ways, I wanted to share. And then Jerry had a hand up for a question, which maybe Jerry, you or Martha could also share about the new resource that you just developed actually for folks who are blind or low vision using Merlin.
Okay, well, let me ask my question first, which is about birds that tend to mimic other sounds. I get really fascinated. I heard a blue jay imitating a red-tailed hawk in my yard last summer, and I wondered, what's he doing? And why is he doing that? So, what do we know about? Is it calls when they're mimicking other birds? It certainly isn't their song.
Well, you have to start with the basics. Blue jays are members of the Corvidae. That's the family of the crows, ravens, and jays. And along with parrots, those are the two smartest bird families. So blue
Hmm.
jays are probably on the intelligence spectrum smarter, for instance, than grackles or juncos. They're thinking all the time, and they're certainly concerned about predators, and they may even like to badger predators. So what blue jays have learned to do, and crows, of course, are also mimics sometimes. They can hear a sound and then remember it and repeat it. Again, they have a complicated syrinx, complex syrinx. So blue jays are notorious for imitating red-tailed hawks. And the reason that they do it is known to them. We can certainly offer possible explanations because we tend, and this is going to sound really weird to you, but we tend to think that nature is so pragmatic that animals do nothing except behaviors that provide enhanced survivorship. But if the animal is comfortable and if it's aware of its surroundings, and it may just decide to have some little fun with some hawks and find out if there's any around. I heard a blue jay do a red-tailed hawk, and it was going Jay, 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 and then stop is sitting up on top of a pine tree, and then went here, here. And then it goes, Jay, Jay, Jay. And then that's not enough for it. No, no, it's got to show off. It does a red-shouldered hawk after that. And I happened, guess what, to have Merlin on. So I looked at Merlin and it's listed three birds: blue jay, red-tailed hawk, red-shouldered hawk. Merlin got it right. The blue jay did a very good imitation of a red-tailed hawk and a red-shouldered. So you got to be careful with when you've got Merlin.
Oh yeah. Well,
I
I'll
think
just
I think Blue Jays. I don't know why they do it, but Blue Jays are very well organized. All birds live in, and I'll go back and say, don't think they're just, it's a walk in the park to be a bird. All birds live in a climate of fear.
mhm.
They can be knocked out at any point by a predator. It can be a ground predator. It can be an air predator. So Blue Jays are always on the lookout, and Blue jays, incidentally, worry about crows, and crows worry about ravens. So even within the Corvidae, you have this group of animals that are afraid of each other
Hmm.
and always on the lookout. And blue jays all over their range seem to like to imitate red-tailed hawks from time to time. And they're often sitting right out in the open when they do it, as I saw when I saw this blue jay up on top of a pine tree.
Well, I want to say, first of all, that this has been spectacular. I've really enjoyed listening to you. I've been birding by ear since the 70s, and I started learning from a biology class where they let me borrow their Cornell University records. And I
Oh,
think the
yeah,
guy's
I
name was
remember.
Arthur Allen, who was the narrator. But even after doing it all these years, I hear sounds out there every day, and I think, I wonder what that is.
Yeah.
And Merlin has helped me tremendously to be able to identify some of the maybe not so common sounds that birds make. But Kat asked me to mention I wrote a series of tips for people who are blind who use iPhones using the voiceover speech output that's built into the iPhone. It just has to be turned on. And there are issues with using Merlin with it. It works well, but it lowers the volume of the speech output so much that you have to put your phone up to your ear to hear it when the bird microphone is listening for obvious reasons. It's listening for birds, so Apple, in their infinite wisdom, feels that you got to lower the sound of the speech output so that it can hear the birds. But anyway, I wrote a tip sheet and we put it on the Birdability website for people who are blind who are using Merlin because it's one of it and there's another app called Larkwire that I use, which is a learning app for learning bird sounds. Those are probably two of the greatest things that have happened to me in the birding area in the last 50 years. Thank you.
That's wonderful. And Cornell is to be very much commended. I been a long-term member of the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology, and it's amazing to see what they've done. They're coming up on the big backyard bird count. They've organized that. They're generating lots of data, and it's it's I think it's one of the strongest organizations for birders to pay attention to and to belong to.
Any other questions or comments from anyone?
Um, I really appreciate tonight's meeting. It was very, very educational, and such a pleasure to take in and enjoy. I truly thank you for your time and the energy, Kat, that you all have put into this. It is absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. Well, just for the fun of it, while I was thinking about this presentation, I went ahead and looked through my old field guide to the birds to see how many of the bird names were named for the vocalizations. And it was really, you take the names for granted. Once you know them, you know them. But did you know the word towhee? Whether it's Rufus-sided towhee or Eastern towhee, as it's now known, that's named for its sound. And that's the sound that used to be described as chewink, chewink, but to some ears it was towhee, towhee. And so that's one. How about among the sparrows? Song sparrow. The song sparrow is named after its song. Its actual Latin name is melodia for the song. So song sparrows, although to my way of hearing it, they're not wood thrushes, they're not orioles. But when I was an 18-year-old, I was at the Audubon camp in Maine at Hog Island, which was a life-changing experience. I decided that's when I was going to become an ecologist and ornithologist. And there was this wonderful instructor named Joseph Cadbury from Philadelphia. And he was showing us a teed up, as we call it, song sparrow, just with its head way back, singing. And he said, now you can always remember that song because it's Madge, 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 put on your tee, kettle. This is a guy who's about 6'2" and weighed as much as a linebacker. And hearing him sound off on a song sparrow was something, as you can tell, you never forget. And so song sparrow is one of our most common birds, named for its voice. And grasshopper sparrow. Grasshopper, you ever what do they have to do with grasshoppers? Well, they do eat them. But what they have to do with them is their vocalization, their song. Song is this little high-pitched buzzing sound that reminded whoever it is, I don't remember who named him, that, oh, it sounds like an insect. It sounds like a grasshopper. Let's call it grasshopper sparrow. And then one of the most common birds that we see in the spring is chipping sparrow. Why do they call it chipping sparrow? What is it? Chipping wood or what? No, it's going this constant chipping sound, one note chipping sound that you hear. That's what it's doing. It's the chipping sparrow. And then one of them that I really like, it's so well named. There's been a lot of criticism of bird names because there's a lot of changes going on in that, and I think some of them definitely should. But anyway, the warbling vireo. I remember going up with Martha Steele and my Martha Vaughn, up to Mount Auburn Cemetery in the spring, and this incessant warbling vireo would sing around one of the ponds, and it couldn't be described any better. It is a warbling vireo. It warbles, this really wonderful warble. So there's an awful lot of birds and then here's one I'll imitate. My wife doesn't like me to imitate this bird because she thinks I don't do it well enough, but I think I'm pretty good at it actually. And that is the American bittern. Now that's a bird that is difficult to find. It's a marsh bird. It's a member of the heron and egret family, the Artidae, but the skulker. It gets down into the tall weeds and it's camouflaged magnificently. It has very good cryptic coloration. And it typically strikes a pose where its neck is straight up and its beak is straight up. And I was told once, and I've tried this and it works, is if you're looking in between marsh grasses to try and find a bittern, don't look for the bittern, look for an eye because the bittern blends in so well. The only thing that doesn't blend in is the eye of the bird. And sometimes you can see that they've got the eye open. But the bittern in the spring swallows air and it forces the air down in a way that it makes a sound. And that's its courtship sound that sounds like somebody hammering a stake into the mud. And I have some very good vocalizations for that, but here's what it sounds like a little bit. And you can hear that in the marsh. It carries. It's a low frequency sound. The frequencies of bird sounds are correlated with the habitats that they're in. And in a habitat such as a marsh, that very low sound moves, and other bitterns can hear it. So that's one of their courtship sounds. So it's just really fun to see how many of these birds fundamentally have names that, like clapper rail, for instance, another marsh bird. What is clapper rail? Well, that's another. If you listen to the voice of a clapper rail, it has a little bit of a clap to it. Kick, 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 like that, something like that. So anyway, and how could I forget one? Whippoorwill. Yeah, that's right. Let's name it Whippoorwill. It's just, why would you ever name it Whippoorwill? Because it goes incessantly, and that sounded like whippoorwill, whippoorwill, whippoorwill. And there's several other birds in that nightjar family that are named for their sounds, like Chuck Will's widow, for instance, and poor Will. So it's cool. So you see that birds, they really are the most like humans in terms of the natural world, in that they are audio visually oriented and take most of their cues from those sense organs. They don't Some birds have very good senses of smell. Birds can smell plankton on the oceans, for instance. But the common songbirds, for instance, like chickadees and titmice and nuthatches, they don't rely on smell at all. They may be surrounded by mammals that are olfactorily driven, like opossums, for instance, but they don't use it. It's either vision or it's song. Those are the two inputs that go into a bird brain. And a bird brain is comparably complex to a mammalian brain. Mammals have a wide range of intelligence. Um, bird and mammals. We are audio-visually oriented mammals, and we have a fairly poor sense of smell. Just ask your dog if you have any doubts about that. They have a good sense of smell. So anyway, geez, I could go on and on. But any last thoughts that or questions or anything? And we're coming up on the hour.
Okay.
I so appreciate your time tonight, John and Martha. You suggesting that John might be just the right speaker. You are absolutely right. What a delight as we move towards the Blind Birder Bird-a-Thon and we are learning together about bird sounds and birding by ear. This was really a fascinating and wonderful introduction for many folks who haven't thought about it. I've been thinking about it for 35 years and I learned any number of things. So I am incredibly grateful for your time and your willingness to be here. Uh, I just want to say again, Martha, Jerry, Donna, and our colleagues up at the Toronto Ornithological Society, who we are working with, are busy at work making sure that plans are in place for the Bird-a-Thon coming up May 3rd and 4th. I want to remind everyone that we have one more opportunity to hear from a speaker about birding, and that will be on March. Oh goodness, now I have to.
10.
Thank you, Martha. March 10th, we'll be joined by Scott Weidensaul, who will be speaking about migration.
You
Certainly,
can't do any better than that.
well, I'm telling you, we have a John Kricher, Scott Weidensaul back to back. It's a pretty fabulous thing. And it really
I'm
is.
just a warm up for him.
What a terrific way, again, to get people engaged and excited because certainly as we get closer to May, we are getting closer to those sounds and those vocalizations that you were discussing, John, and also to the migration that Scott will be talking about next month. Martha, anything you want to add to close us out tonight?
Uh, just wanted to thank John. John, I can always, you're just so incredible. Even I learned some stuff tonight, and what it has been when I first started birding with John and his wife Martha, I could see birds, but I couldn't hear birds. So John and Martha have been going along on my own journey of going from not being able to see anymore, but gaining the capacity to listen to them through cochlear implants. And after so many years of not being able to hear birds, I know others like John and Martha are just, it's just been nice to have this journey of being able to hear birds. Um, uh, and birding is so much by ear. It
Mhm.
really is, even for those with excellent sight. There's so many birds that you do not see, but you hear them.
Mhm.
And one of the things I would comment about hearing birds now and not being able to see them, I am so much more relaxed as a birder.
Mhm.
The sound comes to me. I don't have to look for it. I don't have to like climb over bushes for it. I don't have to, stand out in the rain necessarily for it. It just comes.
Mm.
And I let the songs really wash over me, and it just there is no end to the joy that I experience when I'm listening to birds. And um, thank you, John, for such a wonderful.
Well, thank you, Martha. And that statement is, in fact, the essence of what the magic of birding is. You really know how to do birding. You really
Hmm.
come full circle. And I really congratulate Birdability for enlarging the breadth of birding in America and getting us to a point we couldn't imagine being at years ago. And here we are. And it's just going to get better. And even as birds decline around us, maybe we can become effective enough of us to at least mitigate that to a certain degree. But don't worry about the bad stuff. Just enjoy the good stuff, and there's plenty of it. So go out and listen. It's really worth the time, and you'll love it. I think you probably already do. So it's been a pleasure. I thank you and bid you good night.